those guys are feeding it Miracle Grow or what they're doing, but they got 2 tomato plants, and these are cherry tomatoes. I don't know, you probably can't see them. There's 2 red ones there, and there's bunches of cherry tomatoes all over this plant. This thing is about 12 feet tall, and it's huge. I can stretch my arms this way, and that plant is bigger than my reach of my arms. The point I'm trying to make is cherry tomatoes are one of the most resilient and strongest plants you can grow. If you want to plant, for example, I'm going to grow this thing. I took a cutting off her plant and I've rooted it in a cup of water. I change out the water every day, and it's been about 2 weeks and it's starting to grow roots. I'm going to stick that thing in the ground and grow it in my basement over the winter. And then in the springtime, I'm going to stick it outside. And this thing, cherry tomatoes are one of the most strongest tomato plants you can go, and they're tremendously delicious. There's a plant called sun gold. Those are little bundles of sugary joy. There's nothing better than a sun gold. I love going out into my garden and just picking sun golds and eating them right off the plant. They're excellent. It's like eating candy, except there's no guilt.
But they're small tomatoes.
Yes, they're cherry tomatoes, yes, just like this. So I want you guys to keep that in mind. Cherry tomatoes, they're extremely small, strong, and they have the little small tomato on it. The salad tomatoes, if you will.
Would grape tomato be resilient too?
Some varieties. One variety is Plum Regal that I have. That thing is still growing, and I have 6 tomato plants in pots, and the only 2 that I had left was Better Boy. My wife's daddy, he grew here for many years, and he loved Better Boys. And I can see why, because the only 2 tomato plants out of all the 6 that I grew in pots, I gave them perfect soil, I fertigated them every week, gave them lots of fish emulsion and different things, and those were just happy tomatoes. But the only 2 I got left is a Plum Regal and a Better Boy. So those are another couple of varieties. Now, Big Beef does pretty well here, and I really like Big Beef. I love the taste of those on sandwiches. But here was our tomato harvest this year. It kind of reminds me of a whole desk full of jelly beans. But these things are beautiful, and I'll tell you, this is a miracle right here, because our plants got blight. And what I did was, before any kind of rain event, I harvested. And sometimes I'll harvest them, if you look, that are a little bit yellow still, maybe not quite come out of green. That's okay. You want to do that. The other tomato plant I have listed is, this is how I grow in my greenhouse. And I got this technique from the university, and it really works well. Last year in my greenhouse, I had 100 tomato plants that I lost from blight. So it was a major thing. I did not get 1 tomato out of all that work. Now, I had another couple of hundred of them in there that did produce a little bit. But what I learned from the university is you keep your tomato plant, all the suckers off of it, and you only let it grow 1 shoot up. And then what happens is, I don't know if you can see it from here, but you lower that plant. I have the plant on a spool of string that I can hit a clip and lower it down. So this plant grows and grows, and I lower it down and lower it down. I'll pick the tomatoes off the bottom and the leaves off as they get a little brown. I'll remove them so there's no disease. And the tomatoes really do well here. I did not spray these things too much for blight. I think I sprayed them 3 times this year. 3 or 4 times. And yes. And so this is the method you want to use. You could do this out on your back porch too. If you had a place where you could attach, like maybe on the eave of your house or something. I'm going to show you the spools. But this is the way. Now, you see how the bottom of the stem is kind of folding away and going down. You know, tomatoes are a vine, so when you lower them, you pick the produce off the bottom going up. That's how you do tomatoes. And when you pick that produce and you lower that plant down, it'll kind of wind around. And I've got these in dirt as well, doing the same exact thing. There are 2 kinds of blight. Alternaria, or early blight, splashes up from the soil. Now, alternaria, I don't have a picture, but it's really easy to spot. The leaves turn a little bit yellow with a little bullseye black mark all over the place on those leaves. You can't miss it. The fungus spends the winter in infected plant debris in or on the soil, and this is really, you got to be really mindful of this, where it can survive at least 1 and perhaps several years. So what that means is that you have to thoroughly clean your utensils that you're using to grow tomatoes because of that. Because this stuff can overwinter on your pots, it can overwinter on your stakes. So what you want to do is just use a little light mixture of hydrogen peroxide and water. I think it's like 6% or so. And that will clean your utensils that you're going to use. Now, late blight, Phytophthora infestans, flies through the air or water and can fly 30 miles in a night. Now, we've had late blight here. Late blight has been here for probably, I don't know, 2 months, 6 weeks, 2 months, something like that. These are the main 2 diseases in this area. Now, we don't get too many viral diseases. Sometimes you'll get, have you guys ever seen plants that just wilt on you? That's verticulum wilt. And what you want to do if you have that problem is you really need to work your soil, and you also need to, get tomato plants that have that little V with the seed that says it's resistant to that. I don't have too many of those problems, and I don't think that runs too much in this area. So this just outlines cleaning your stakes, pots, and you want to mulch the soil, and that'll help you from not getting early blight. Late blight is not contracted from infected equipment. It basically comes through the air. And you know, when it rains and rains and rains, that's a wonderful way for that stuff. It just rages. It flies through the air. And it just looks for a weak plant. And I'm going to show you in a minute how to prevent this problem. So you want to have an integrated method of blight management. You want to have more, you don't want to just hit your sprays. I'm going to give you a world-class spray technique, but you want to have everything in place. For example, use no or low till. Now that's going to blow a lot of you guys' mind, but I'm going to start going on this way, because what happens is when you till the ground, you're losing organic matter, for one thing. And another thing, there's a lot of other bad things that are happening. For example, your soil should be teeming with life. It should have lots of earthworms and microbial activity. It should have life in it. And if you're mixing up the soil and destroying all your soil structure, you're going to have unhealthy soil, and as a result, your plants are not going to be as robust. Now, one way you can achieve this, I realize it's difficult because you have to have a soft place for the plants to grow, and that's the way you do it. But here's a way you can do it. You till the first year, and you till as deep as you can get. And then what you do is you add compost, you add organic matter into that soil. And there's some other things that you want to do, which we're going to cover. But that's one of the main things. And then every other year, you want to have a raised bed, and you never walk on that raised bed. And also, you got to keep that thing weeded. Now that's a problem sometimes, but you do. You have to keep it weeded, and you mulch the heck out of that thing. You keep your compost, you put compost on the top 1 to 3 inches every year, and let that be your plant food. You can add some other nutrients. I'm going to show you that procedure. But you want to get away from tilling. That's one of the most important things you want to start thinking about. I'm completely going to pull away from tilling. I may till once every 4 years, just what I have to, because I don't like what it does to the soil, and I know it kills the life in the soil, so that's got to stop. Every year, cover crop the soil. Over winter, what we're using this year is hairy vetch and rye. And even if you just have a small little garden, plant it. If you just need a small little portion, and I have enough of it, I'll sell you a portion of it. But you want to use that. What these plants do is they add 100 pounds of nitrogen, and they add a lot of organic matter. When those roots of those plants die, they form places for worms to go down in, and worms are tillers of the soil. You want to have proper soil drainage. You know, if you're over-tilling your soil, you are not going to have proper soil drainage. What's going to happen is it's going to wash away, as well as all the nutrient that you put in there. One thing that's they're finding in the streams of America in our water tables, that they're getting polluted with nitrogen chemicals, and the reason why is because these farmers are over-tilling their land. They're not letting any life grow in it, and they're just throwing chemicals at it. And generally they only throw about 2 or 3 chemicals, whatever the minimum they have to get a nice green plant to grow the way they want. They don't necessarily care about our health. And that's why I like using products that give the plants over 90 nutrients that they can pull from. You've got to combine with maximize air circulation. You know, the best kind of growing area is on a slight incline where the air flows really well. At different times of the day, I learned this when I was a firefighter in the Forest Service, at different times of the day, the air will go down the slope or up the slope. And it's just like water, the way air goes. If you're in a concave, like a valley, like Mills River, you're going to have problems. You know, this valley right here does. It has problems. It has an inversion problem. It can't circulate air, so you have these terrible blight problems here. And as a result, most of these farmers, you'll see them out there spraying and spraying and spraying. Now, I can assure you, most of them are not using the techniques that I'm going to tell you in a few minutes about using that are organic. Most of them are using pretty harsh chemicals. Combined preventative spray techniques. These you want to do weekly if it's rainy, or every 10 days. You can back off a little bit if it's not raining as much. You can back off a little bit and do it every 10 days. Really, you know, I've sometimes been at work and I've worked and worked and I couldn't get to spray my plants. And all the ones out in the field, except for the blight resistant ones that I put off by themselves, are all dead with blight. But you know, the conventional thinking is get out there weekly and do it. And so what I'm going to say is, yes, you can back off a little bit. You don't necessarily, if you want to do it weekly or every 10 days, you can get away with that. But you really do have to be on top of it. I don't want to minimize that, because you'll lose your hard work, and nobody wants that. Grow genetic varieties that withstand blight. I've already named a couple of them, the cherry tomato kinds. We have Big Beef, we've got Better Boy, we've got Sun Gold as a cherry tomato. That's one of my favorite. It's extremely high levels of sugar and vitamin C. It's very healthy and good for you. Roma tomatoes are resistant to blight. One of my favorite tomato plants is called Super Italian Paste. It's really good for making soups and sauces, tomato sauce with. Super Italian Paste. And it grows a tomato that's shaped about like this. It's little oblong. But those are all blight resistant. Now, some of the best tasting tomatoes in the world right now, if you had a world-class taste testing thing of tomatoes, you would find that Cherokee Purple, the heirloom, is one of the best tasting tomatoes in the world, and as well as Pink Brandywine. Now, those, if you know about those plants, they put all of their energy into the tomato. They don't put any energy into fighting off disease. So if there's a disease 1,000 miles away, that plant's going to get it. So if you're on top of your situation, if you greenhouse them and you take care of your sprays, there's lots of money to be made off of selling organic tomatoes of those two varieties. You know, If you need a part-time job and you get good at growing those 2 varieties of tomatoes, you can bring in some cash. I don't know if you guys know that. You may not know that. But people will pay, and you'll have so many people buying those 2 particular varieties of tomatoes that you won't be able to keep them in stock. It's that major because they don't grow here. But everybody here knows, because this is a backyard farming community, everybody here knows that those are the 2 ones you want to grow. Cherokee Purple and Pink Brandywine, and there's another variety, Brandywine. Any of those. Any of those. But the thing is, you'll probably not be able to get them to grow until you really learn your stuff and take it seriously. And then you'll find that you'll do quite well. Good air drainage makes a huge difference. The best fungicide in the world is sunlight. Now that is the best thing for getting rid of blight. But you know, here we don't have a whole lot of that sometimes. There's been 2-week stretches of time where it rained a little bit or a lot every day here in our farm. And I was off at work, not able to take care of the tomato plants, and they got knocked quite a bit. You know, funny thing is though, the cherry